Welcome to our first AI uh, first of the AI Masterclass series. So it's an intro to AI for product managers with Alex Cohen. And today we're going to really talk you through the fundamentals of AI that product managers should know. So like how it's disrupting the industry, um, making sure you understand the foundations of how AI actually works, like talking about large language models, tokens, neural networks, the implications AI is going to have on product management and your future job roles, and then look at some of the AI tool and platform landscape. This session is being recorded. We have two of our learner cohorts on the call. We've also invited leads to our introductory sessions. So we run four of these sessions, and we usually invite leads to one or two, almost always the intro one, which we're doing here. So welcome those that are interested in Kings. The full Masterclass series is below. After the session, we look at how to improve productivity for product managers. We then go into a really great session that Alex leads with knowing when and how to integrate AI into your products, so actually managing AI products, and then how to become a thought leader in product management and to build up your skills and knowledge in AI for product management. So please contact kings@fourthrev.com if you have any more questions about the program or how AI is incorporated into our career accelerator. But for now, I'll just kick it off to our wonderful host, Alex. Take it away.
Thank you very much, Justin. Good evening from Brisbane, Australia, and top of the morning to you all over there in the UK. My name is Alexander, and I will be your masterclass instructor tonight. Now, I originally spent most of my professional career in London, thus the connection to King's College and to Justin at Fourth Rev. But right now, I run an AI consultancy and agency called Scope and Go, where we build AI solutions for people with disabilities and accessibility challenges and apply the innovations to big business. I'm previously the head of platform and product manager at a bunch of different companies. But tonight, we're going to be covering off some pretty basic information around AI. So now I apologize if some of this stuff seems rudimentary, but I invite you to ask the curveball questions that you're burning to know an answer to. I promise you I will have a good answer for you. But for right now, what we're going to be talking about is introduction to AI. Now, I have had a pretty fun career working in emerging technology. I started back in 2014-15 in augmented reality. I've been doing a lot of work over in the UK in that space, which led me to meet the now King of England, which is just a subtle flex that I like to throw into these slides just for the hell of it. But the reason I bring up AR and augmented reality is within 5 years, this is where we're going to be getting to. Right now, a lot of people are talking about AI, but as product managers, we have to keep our head on a swivel. We have to be looking at the horizon and saying, what is the next way that our customers are going to want to get value from our products? And an interface and the way that they interact with those products is a big, big, big part of the way that we deliver product and deliver that value. And it's really important, and I just wanted to start tonight by kind of painting this landscape that within 5 years, majority of the way that we're going to interact with digital content is actually going to be through voice and through heads-up displays in devices such as the Meta Ray-Bans that will eventually have a full screen in your eyes. So spatial interfaces is something to kind of keep in the back of your head and do a little bit of look at. There's a couple of really interesting companies that are starting to do things in this space. This is the Spacetop G1, and this is an interesting take on a desktop computer, but done with a pair of augmented reality glasses. So it's really interesting to see how and where products that we create today will be adapted and deployed on devices such as this into the future. But that's enough about the ultimate future state from into 5 years from now. Let's talk about where we are today and maybe go back 10 years. Because I get this question all the time about AI and product management. And a lot of people are saying, is AI going to be the death of product managers? And I am absolutely convinced it is not the case. And here's some tangible evidence. There's a job post from 2014 from Facebook, which is now Meta. And the almost identical job post today, well, 2024, there's a typo there, 2025, for pretty much the exact same role. We've just changed the title. In the age of AI, the ability to understand exactly why and what you're doing and how an AI system or an AI tool is going to be providing value is not something a developer can naturally do. It does still fall to us as product managers. So I don't see product managers going out of fashion anytime soon. But when we talk about AI, I like to talk about it in the terms of momentum. And so tonight I've set up a little bit of a display so I can walk around. And momentum is one of those big ones that I like to think about when we talk about AI. And I share a story from my youth. When I was 8 years old, I went down to a cattle station, a sheep station down in rural Australia, Armidale. And 8 years old, it took 8 hours. Australia is a big country. 8 hours to drive from my hometown to this cattle station. And when we got there, the parents that took me, it was my friend's parents at the time, were sick of 2 8-year-old boys in the car. So they released us into the wild, and we ran to the top of a big hill on the cattle station, and we found a big boulder. Now, if anyone else has been an 8-year-old boy, or a girl for that matter, and you see a big boulder at the top of a hill, there's only one thing you're going to want to do, which is give it a good push. And that's what we did. And every time I talk about AI, I like to reflect on that moment in my life because it was the momentum of that rock rolling down the hill, gathering speed as it went, continuously getting faster and faster and faster, and smashing into a tree at the bottom of the hill, knocking it clean over. That makes me think about the current wave of AI innovation that we're in. And we all have to ask ourselves this question: where are we going to be when AI fully hits every part of our society? And we're going to be talking a little bit about that tonight. But for you all in the audience, I'm going to ask my first question of the night. I'm just going to pull up my Q&A section here to make sure that I can see some of these answers. But the question is, when was AI first invented? I'm looking for a specific year. If anyone wants to hazard a guess, let me see if I can actually pull up the chat. Perhaps I can, perhaps I can't. We'll see. But let's see. Nope, I don't seem to have access. Oh, there it is. 1945. Okay, 1945, 1980, 1960, 1970. These are good guesses. You're getting close, very close. 1950s is pretty well bang on the money. So AI was actually first postulated in 1950 by Alan Turing. And so Alan Turing obviously was the inventor of the computer, came out of Bletchley Park, and he theorized, what if machines could think? And that's where he actually went on to write a research paper called the Turing test. And if you're familiar with computer science, it's one of the benchmarks that we use to determine whether or not AI is sentient. And we haven't yet beat the Turing test. But 1950, the first notion, or real notion, of artificial intelligence. But let's have a look at where the next milestone was. And that was in 1997 when Dragon Dictate first launched the ultimately first successful commercial product using purely artificial intelligence. And I say this because if you took the artificial intelligence out of Dragon Dictate, that entire tool doesn't work. So ultimately, it was another 20 years after the first real application of AI until we got to 2017, when the research team at DeepMind, which was acquired by Google in London, released a paper called Attention is All You Need. And they theorized, what if machines could be trained to focus while training? It took 5 years after that research paper was released for the first genuine ChatGPT to take the world by storm. And that was 2022. That's 3 years ago. Coming up on almost bang on 3 years ago. November 2022 was when ChatGPT properly launched. And in those 3 years since, we've seen an incredible increase in the models and the capability and the intelligence that those models produce. And so this is the paper. Attention is all you need. If you're a bit of a nerd, go have a read. But if you're anything like me, you'll download the paper and hand it to an AI to read for you. But let's have a look at where those 3 years have kind of played out since the beginning of that research paper was released in 2017. Now, the blue line here is model intelligence. And it looks like my font is a little broken because these are quite white. But this is June 2018. This is February, May, November 2022, May 2024. And what we're seeing here is this blue line is talking about the different AI models from just OpenAI. and what their relative intelligence would be if they were a human being. And that pink line is an interesting line that we should all kind of pay attention to. And that's the theoretical amount of humanly economically valuable labor that humans provide with that level of intelligence. And so what that really effectively means is that we're getting models that in theory can start to produce almost all of the valuable tasks that we do as human beings. Now, I can tell you that this is incredibly misleading for a couple of key reasons. One, that pink line is extremely theoretical. I work with AI agents on a daily basis, so do not fear, they are not coming for us just yet. The second is that AI is not measured in IQ. This is how the IQ kind of breaks down, and it really is how far away from the average person does your intelligence quotient stand. And so therefore, it's not a really good reflector for an artificial intelligence. They're using benchmarks and other techniques to measure their intelligence level. So AI is not really there on this spectrum. You have to go and read a bunch of technical benchmarks to see where they're at. But as you can see, if you're anything like me, you're kind of down this end near the bottom end of the IQ spectrum, and AI is definitely working its way towards the top. But the real rate limiting factor that is preventing AI from getting into this absolutely unstoppable intelligence gain is the compute necessary. Now, a lot of this should be relatively straightforward for you all. I shouldn't be saying anything that you don't already know. But this is an example, just OpenAI, based on what we have publicly available. And there's one trend here that's really interesting. I'm just going to draw on the screen here. I want you to have a quick look at these numbers here, these ones in these boxes. These numbers represent the time between major model releases, right? And so what does that trend line look like? And if we think about when AI was first released, and this is November 22, this is just the end of the year, or actually January, February of this year. We can start to see that the trend, the time it's taking for AI models to increase intelligence is on a very fast downward curve. We're getting a rapid rate of innovation in AI capability. And why is that important to factor in as product managers? Well, this is something that we all really need to bring home, because if we look at what AI is in the grand scheme of things, it's really reasoning. It's that ability to reason. And what is really interesting that's coming out, this is a research paper from February or March of this year. It was talking about OpenAI's O1. And these two graphs are a little bit hard to read, but they're very interesting once you do. What they are talking about is the accuracy of a response, given the same response, but given more time to think through an answer. And so this is at training time when the AI models are being trained, and this is at test time, which is effectively when you are typing something into ChatGPT or you're making an API call to this API, the model server. And what we're seeing is the longer we give models to think about the answer before answering and actually responding, the smarter they are. As you can see, we've got a 20% accuracy versus an almost 80% accuracy when you give these models more time. And that's a really interesting and fascinating kind of outcome. But it's not unlike us as human beings. We all are given opportunities to answer really quickly, but most of the time, if we stop, think about a problem, we actually get a better answer. And so how does that play out in the real world? Well, 4.0 at the time of this research study was not a reasoning model. The researchers gave it a task to take these 16 little items and group them into their categories and then name the categories. And as you can see, 4.0 in this research tried to come up with bread as the first category. Now, I think a bagel is definitely a type of bread. A slice, bread slice, absolutely. Bread loaf. I don't know what a bread shank is. That's a bit strange. Anyone else? That's a bit weird, right? And then I don't know about you, but I don't know what a whiff movement is. I think it's kind of something maybe like this, but I'm still not sure. So if anyone does know, please let me know. But what's interesting is if you give the exact same problem to a model that has the ability to think, which is the O1 model, you can see the results were far, far better. We can see that the bagel is round, wreath, tire, lifesaver, these are all circles. And this got the task bang on accurate. So a golf whiff, that's actually a thing. Not sure about a movement. So what we can see is that the longer we give AI models to think about these things, the better it can apply a reasoning to its task. And that reasoning is essential in some of the most important tasks in our professional life. So these are just a few of where deep reasoning might be leveraged. And obviously these are, I had a list of about 150 and I cherry picked the first 8 or so. But this is really what we're talking about when we talk about AI. So everything you've heard, forget about it. Think just when you hear AI, we've taught computers how to think. And now we have that intelligence commoditized and accessible for us to deploy to solve real problems for people. And that is a really awesome thing. And I want to just reinforce the fact that these things are moving, these models and this intelligence is moving at a rate that is completely unbelievable. So this is my son. This is him when he was 7 days old. We were bringing him home from the hospital. And that's him at 4 years old and 7 days to the day. He's a GPT-3 baby. So he was born at the exact same time as GPT-3. Now, if he was an AI, how far do you think he would be in his educational study? Well, I can tell you, he would already have his PhD. And I can assure you, he does not. We're still working through diapers and nappies right now. So it really goes to show that all of us are outmatched. We are very much, no one can beat these AI in terms of their ability to learn. So we now need to learn how to harness these tools and leverage them to make ourselves better product managers and better people in general. And so this is a bit of an interesting question. So I always like to ask this question, but before I do, I like to tell a story of when I was just about 10 years old. I was going down to visit my grandparents who lived in Adelaide at the time, and I was flying down with my folks. And my mum asked if I wanted to go and sit in the cockpit for landing and encouraged me to ask the flight attendant to go let me do that. And so I did, and the flight attendant, 20 minutes before landing, comes and grabs me and takes me to the cockpit and straps me into the jump seat. And can I just tell you, that was the coolest thing I'd done in my life for many, many years afterwards. And so we come into land and the plane touches down and I'm buzzing and I still think about that moment all the time. But something changed and that happened pretty quickly. So September 11th, 2001, a couple of planes flew into some towers in the United States and no one on this planet was allowed into the cockpit of a commercial airliner ever again. And so if you've never done that, if you've never sat in the cockpit, I'm sorry, but the boat has sailed for you. And I say this because change is unavoidable. Sometimes it happens slowly and sometimes it happens very, very quickly. And with AI, we are seeing probably the most fundamental change in human history unfolding in real time. It's a great time to be alive and it's an awesome time to have the ability to start adapting to everything. And so our society is predicated on this fundamental assumption that humans are the most intelligent species on the planet. Up until just recently, you could go to a zoo. I mean, you can still do it now. You can go to a zoo and look and find animals. Has anyone been to the London Zoo in, I think it's Regent's Park at the top there? If you go to that zoo, there's giraffes with necks way longer than us as humans, and there's crocodiles with teeth that could snap us in half, and there's rhinoceroses that could run faster and spear us. There's snakes with venom that is far more poisonous. There are attributes in all of these animals that far better than humans in a physical contribution, in a physical comparison. But the reason that they are in a cage and we are not is our intelligence. And therefore, our closest intelligence is actually dolphins. And unfortunately, I don't think dolphins are building any skyscrapers anytime soon. But as individuals, we access the abundance of wealth that humanity has created. All of the buildings, all of the products, all of the cars, all of the cool stuff. We access that by contributing economically valuable labor, which is a fancy way of saying we trade our time for money. And so When we trade our time for money, we're saying, yep, I'm going to go get a job. You're going to pay me an amount of money and happy days. And the world is built on this assumption that we can all contribute economically valuable labor. And as product managers, we have to have this in the back of our head, that we are always going to be looking at how can we create value? How is someone going to want to spend their money with me to solve a problem that they don't want to do themselves? And with AI, it's a double-edged sword. There's going to be a lot of problems that people can solve themselves with their own tooling, and there's going to be problems that are just too difficult or too hard or too boring for them to solve, and that's where we can step in. But I talk about this assumption because we all need to ask ourselves this question. What happens when this assumption is invalidated? What happens when we are no longer the smartest species on the planet? How are we going to be leveraging that intelligence to create incredible outcomes? Now, I don't have an answer. These are rhetorical questions, but it is something that you should start thinking about. And I say this because there's this number that floats around in my head. And this number is a really interesting one. I don't know if there's any musical theater fans out there, but if there are, you might know where this number comes from. This is the number of minutes in a year. And if you have seen the musical Rent, I want to apologize for the song that's now playing in your head. But if we look at how a year is typically broken down, it's roughly broken down this way. There's about 115,000 hours of us working, 175,000 hours of us sleeping if we're sleeping 8 hours a day. If you're like Justin with a newborn, I promise you he's not getting that much sleep each year. And the rest of that time is us doom scrolling on Instagram. And the reason I say this is AI affords us this incredible opportunity. Things that used to be impossible are now very, very possible. And so we can talk about AI, but it's always good to consider how can you leverage AI for good? And as product managers, we always are faced with ethical challenges of should we be doing something that may not necessarily be in the best interest of our customers, but makes us more money. And so we have to wrestle with those ethical dilemmas. And so I mentioned earlier that I run a business building accessibility tools and accessibility solutions. And the reason is my father. And this is him when he came to visit me when I was living in London. And in November of 2023, he was diagnosed with motor neuron disease. And in the lead up to my wedding, I cloned his voice using AI because motor neuron disease, ALS, took his voice 6 months after that diagnosis. So in the lead up to my wedding, which was 9 months later, we enabled him to deliver his wedding speech using his cloned AI voice. And from that point, we've started to build out real-time applications to help him communicate naturally. And we've shared that with 160 people around the world that are accessing for free, and we're about to roll it out to a whole bunch more. These are the things that you can do, and I built that tool in my spare time with very little technical expertise. And this is the power of AI. And as product managers, we are all very much focused on how do we really pull together value. And the problem being that someone else had to execute on. We're starting to see execution take a lot less time and become a lot easier. So you're actually getting to a place where the hard part, which is knowing what to build, is becoming the focus. And so we focused on solving some problems for 3.8 million people worldwide who have speech-related issues. There's 140,000 people around the world diagnosed with motor neuron disease alone, 2,100 here in Australia, including my dad. And unfortunately, they will only live about 27 months after diagnosis. So within the next 5 years, we're going to see a massive fundamental change in the product space because software will become commoditized. AI is already replacing human engineers. Now, I am technical. I do write code for a living as well as product management. But I'm not writing any code anymore. I'm having my AI agents write that code, and then I'm just reviewing and saying, yes, this is meeting my requirements, or no, this is not meeting my requirements. This is what you need to change. So think of it like having a dev team that you can control and tell exactly what to do, and then maybe they get the job done properly instead of how traditional product management used to be done, where you'd write a bunch of tickets and then 3 weeks later, someone would send you something to review and they've just completely missed the point. But as a result, it's highly likely that we'll start to see point SaaS solutions die. So every SaaS out there was built on this primary fundamental assumption that we are going to solve a big problem for a huge number of people, and we're going to create economies of scale and efficiency by allowing one dev team to service one platform that has generalized features and functionality that solves for a large group of people. I actually think that we're going to start to see the world of custom-built apps reign, which means that we're going to get really niche solutions and bespoke outcomes. And these are the things that are going to require product managers to be really, really switched on to. So AI is the ultimate enabler for us in this context. And ultimately, we're going to see a lot of orchestration platforms that will allow product managers to oversee multiple products at once. For anyone thinking about switching in to product management, or anyone that's just started their journey with Fourth Rev currently, you must be wondering, what the heck is this guy talking about? How could you possibly manage multiple products all at the same time? And I can assure you, with AI, we're getting to that place where there's just going to be this incredible capacity for individuals to be able to deliver huge amounts of insight and execute on that insight very, very quickly. And so this is, we're going to get into a lot of that in detail in the second workshop, where we actually dig into how AI is being implemented in the product space. So stick around and come along to that one. But ultimately, this is one of the things that I'm filled with the most optimism of, and you should all be too. Because AI isn't just about large language models. Now, if anyone's unfamiliar, Hugging Face is an online repository which has open source AI models, and there are some incredibly capable open source models out there. As you can see, large language models are one very small section of all the other types of AI models out there. And so when we were talking about how can you leverage AI to create these solutions, well, there's pretty much a solution for almost every problem out there right now. And there's only going to be more and more and more in the coming years. So it's a great time to be getting into this space. So here's a question for you. How do large language models process prompts? And what is a token? And I really want you to tell me, what is a token? So in that chat, jump in there and tell me what a token is. I'm going to see if I can make this chat a little bit bigger and see what everyone's saying. So feel free to tell me what you guys think a large language model is. Oh, that's the Q&A. I found the Q&A eventually. Guys, don't worry. I've got it. So now I'm just going to try and find the chat. Sorry. Let's see if we can, there it is there. Okay, let's have a look. A group of words is a token. Give me a second, just asking Copilot. That's a good answer. Who's that? Ainsling. That is a very cheeky answer. I like it, but that's actually what I advocate for. So, excellent. Well, I'm going to put you all out of your misery and tell you straight away what a token is. And effectively, a token is the smallest unit into which data can be broken down for an AI to process. And why is this important to understand? Well, at the end of the day, tokens are the things that large language models are ingesting. So when you type your prompt in, what you're actually sending to a large language model is a big array of numbers. Oh, I've just lost lights. Excuse me 1 second while I talk and walk. So a large language model processes those tokens by, processes your prompt by breaking all those words down into little tokens and then performing massive math on those prompts. And based on how the model comes out, it actually creates that outcome. And so you can actually go and have a look at what a token is. So here is an example of a couple of tokens. If you just search for a tokenizer, the OpenAI has one, and there's a bunch of them on the internet, but it's a really fascinating thing to go and have a look at. And on the left here with the yellow header, you can see that this is a sorted list of the word token in ChatGPT's token language. And so you can see that there's a bunch of different permutations of tokens, some with uppercase, some with lowercase, some with spaces in front of them, some with a bunch of poor spelling. Each has a unique identifier, which is strange because who would think that an underscore token has any real significance? And you've got to realize that when you're training a model to ingest the world's information, small nuances in individual words actually make a massive difference. And if you walk away from this workshop tonight, or this masterclass tonight, with nothing else, just know that every word that you put into a large language model makes a massive difference to the outcome of that model. But the question I ask to everyone is, how are large language models trained? What do they look like? And if you haven't already done this, I encourage everyone to go and have a minute and play around with training your own convolutional neural network, which is a CNN, which is effectively what a large language model is. And if we have time at the end, I might actually pull it up and step you through it and actually explain exactly how a large language model is trained at a very, very high level. But we're going to push on for now because we might run out of time. But what we really need to know is that context windows are getting big, and the foundational models are getting context windows up to 1 million tokens at the moment, which is astronomically large. Now, this graph is potentially a little out of date, but ultimately, this is an important thing for us as product managers to understand, because the token limit or the context limit is the maximum amount of information that a large language model or an AI system can process in one hit. And why is that important? Well, it means that we need to effectively compartmentalize all of our tasks to get the best possible outcome. Just because we have 1 million tokens that we can operate, which roughly works out to be about 4 million words or 3.5 million words, which is 350 pages of text. Sorry, 350,000 pages of text. Don't quote me on that one. I'm getting confused. But ultimately, it is something that means that when we're thinking about how we leverage AI in our product context, we might not necessarily be able to dump all of our data into a large language model and have it give a good outcome. And I want you to think about a wheelbarrow. And if you've ever carried something in a wheelbarrow or a bucket, let me ask you a question. Is it easier to carry that bucket if the bucket is filled to the brim and you can't spill anything? You're not allowed to let anything overflow or else you lose important information. Or is it better if the bucket is only filled 75% of the way? And my bucket is a very crude analogy for one of the actual unwritten rules, unspoken rules about large language models and AI right now, which is that even though we have 1 million tokens of limit, they're really only effective to about 75% of the way there. You'll all have seen this. If you've got a conversation with a large language model and you start with a very clear set of instructions and it's giving you really good answers, and then after a few back and forths, it's just dumb and it's just not remembering anything or doing anything useful. And it's not because the AI is dumb or the AI you're doing anything wrong. It's because the context window has filled up to a point where it's now no longer able to identify what the ultimate objective or goal is. And therefore, it's lost its purpose, it's lost its understanding, and you don't get a great outcome. And so these context limits are really important for us as PMs to factor in, because if you're integrating AI into your product, you want to get the highest quality outcome every single time. You want to be able to produce the best possible outcome for your customer and solve that value proposition every single time without exception. And if you are filling up your systems to a point where they can no longer be useful, you're going to create a really bad outcome. And we talk on that in a lot of detail. Now, where this has been really beneficial has been for engineers. Software engineers have had access to tools like GitHub Copilot and Claude and Cursor and all of these tools for quite a few years now. And we've started to see the rate of AI innovation and the rate of AI taking over and building out tooling in that software space just increase exponentially. If you haven't already had to play with some of these tools like Lovable or v0.dev there's 15 of them that are just not coming to mind. I really only use Lovable and v0.dev. But if you haven't already played with them, go and have a play. And these are tools that are just unbelievably powerful for product managers, because we know what the problem is. We know typically how we want the solution to look. And so the AI can go off and execute. And so if we look at the current process, or what I would consider as the legacy process or the pre-AI process, this is kind of how the product management process happens. We start with customer research, and then we kind of develop and identify strategies to solve those problems and identify really clear objectives of what we want to do. We then build that into a roadmap of essentially high-level features or functionality groups. We then go and gather requirements, and typically we then turn those requirements into tickets, which are then prioritized in a backlog. And if they're anything like any of the agile product management teams that I've run and been a part of, the backlog is 10 times bigger than the actual tickets that get done. But then maybe a few of those tickets then get added to a design or review sprint, which then allows them to get sent off to an actual technical sprint where we actually go off and have developers working on it. And then the developers will do a sprint kickoff. They'll develop over the course of 2 or 3 sprints, and they'll iterate, and every day they'll talk about how little they've done or how much they've done and how great it is. And then they'll send that off to QA to get tested, and QA will say, this is terrible, go and fix the thing that you want. And then eventually it gets released to a customer. Now, if you've got a really great and genuinely agile product process, that might take a couple of hours or days, but most of the teams, we're talking measuring these things in weeks, especially when you have large products. And then once the product is in place with the customer, or the feature and the functionality is there with the customer, we then get a bunch of changes and change requests we have to manage with stakeholders. We have to update our documentation. And then we get the dreaded customer feedback, which we also love. And the customers will tell us whether they love it, they hate it, and then we start again. And so this was the legacy. This is how product management has been done previously. And ultimately, if you break this down into kind of 2 key parts, product managers really had 2 key areas that they played in this process. One was strategic, which was kind of like bringing people along for the journey, be it internal stakeholders or key customer stakeholders. They were about aligning the organization around why there was value to be had and why this was the right thing to do. They communicated the vision of what they wanted to accomplish in that product. And these are all things that you were able to do as product managers. And they made sure that the value proposition was really clearly documented. And then there was, and this typically, like your senior product managers, these are people that are typically quite senior in the organization. And then you have your tactical product managers, and these people are in the weeds, in the trenches, scoping and documenting, prioritizing backlogs, having arguments with your developers about, no, this has to happen in this way, and making sure that they're communicating that back to other stakeholders in the organization. And I think with what AI is going to do is it's going to start moving all of our product management roles and responsibilities from a tactical more to strategic, with some elements of tactical. So it's a really good thing that's happening with AI. And it's a great time to be looking at how you can leverage AI in that product management process so that you can start focusing on those important strategic outcomes that actually make the difference, and assume that the tactical stuff is going to be handled by AI. And it's getting really, really good at that. So there are a couple of really cool things that I encourage you all to go and play with. There's 2 that if you haven't already done so, and I'm redoing this one about 4 months after I did the first one, so this might be everyone already knows, but Ollama and LM Studio, so those 2 are tools that you could go have a play with. So Ollama.com has a great little chat interface. I've thrown up the image there for LM Studio as well. Those 2 are really great for going and downloading those Hugging Face models and having a play with some of those open source models. Now, they run pretty well on most computers. If you've got a Mac, it's going to run pretty well on those Macs. You'd be surprised at how big an AI model and how sophisticated you can have it running on your computer. And then if you want to, and I encourage you all as product managers, go out and see how you could validate a problem using something like V0. You don't necessarily have to build the full product, but you can definitely validate with landing page and some questionnaires and mapping out some designs on how you want something to unfold with a tool like V0. And that's a chat-based interface that really allows you to very rapidly iterate through ideas and thinking. Now, we kind of come towards the end, and we're going to dive into some Q&A, and I really hope that you have a lot of questions for me, because I know that a lot of this stuff you've probably already heard before, and I would love to make sure that any of those burning questions you have definitely get an answer. So throw your curliest questions at me. I can handle it, and I look forward to it. But ultimately, I want to say thank you for coming along tonight. We're gonna jump into the Q&A right now. But ultimately, our next kind of AI masterclass is going to be on how do we actually improve that productivity and how do we actually leverage AI tangibly hands-on in our AI product lifecycle. Now, I only see a couple of questions coming in, so let me just make sure that these chats are up to date. So if you do have questions, please throw them in there. I am very much open to getting into a bit of back and forth. If we have enough time, I will actually open up and show you on the screen how an AI model is trained. So let me see if I can just pull this one over here and make it nice and big, because my eyesight is not what it used to be. It could be argued that product adoption is also driven by user perception. That is a very good point. And it could also be argued that the general attitude around gestures and voice activation is lackluster at best. In broad strokes, what are some of the initiatives undertaken that could change public perception of the reliability of these features? And how would the UX census be carried out? This is a great question. There's two parts to this question. And for everyone, my understanding of this question is really, firstly, right now we have seen really terrible voice interfaces. If you've ever used Siri and tried to get Siri to do something, or if you ever use your Google Assistant, it's just terrible. And that's when you're sitting at home in a quiet room. When you're out in public, it's just game over. What we're going to start to see with the advances of AI and the ability for it to intelligently understand and predict and filter out background noise, you're going to be able to actually engage with a lot of really interesting conversations. Over the next 6 months, probably by maybe May, June next year, we're going to see every single one of the major foundational companies, AI foundational companies, Google, Anthropic, OpenAI, they're all going to launch a browser-based AI tool, which is like chat, but instead of you chatting to get the outcome, you go ahead and do your task in whatever web app or whatever website that you want, and the AI is there to assist you, and it can interact with the same elements on the page that you can. And so that may actually be voice activated and voice driven. And so this is going to be a massive change. And I think what we're going to see is it's going to be one of those changes that happens all sort of a sudden. We're not really going to see this gradual change. You're just going to wake up one day, this incredible outcome is going to be released, and you're going to want to just play around with it. And so ultimately, I think that the perception and the general attitudes around these tools are going to change very rapidly. And we've seen this with AI. A lot of people never really wanted to chat. I don't know if you ever thought about getting on the customer chat bot before AI and trying to solve your query with a chat bot. You just pick up the phone and call them, or you go into a store or something. I think what we're seeing is as the capabilities of these tools and as the capabilities of these interface styles become more and more refined, that perception rapidly changes. And so how do we actually go about mapping out or performing some kind of UI, UX analysis? I don't have a good answer for you there, and I'm going to be honest about this. But what I would say is that it's going to be a case of people that are out there trialing and playing, and I can tell you firsthand, you can build this using V0. I have done it personally. You can actually build a voice-first interface that updates the page using AI in real time. It is very easy to do. Just ask the AI what you want, and it will deliver on that for you. You can just test this and start experimenting. And so I think from a UX perspective, there's going to be a lot of assumptions that you're going to have to make and a lot of logical leaps that you want to get to. But at the end of the day, it's just going to have to be a bunch of experiments. And this is the downside for UX, UI when you're at that frontier of where technology is at. And AI and augmented reality and voice-based interface is very much on that frontier. So hopefully that answered that question. But let's move on to the next one. How is it that GPT-01 performs better than 04? Is that the thinking part that's differently engineered? Now, good question. The 01 in that research paper was the first iteration of OpenAI's reasoning models. We're now at 4.1 and 4.5, and we've definitely gone past that. O1 is kind of like no one uses it anymore. But at the time, 4.0 was what we called a non-reasoning model. It was a static model. It didn't actually have any internal thought. It didn't sit there and think through it. And you would have remembered this because if you go back and you can recall what it was like interfacing with ChatGPT 4.0 in the chat interface, it was like, here's a question, immediately you get an answer. And now when you type in a question, it's thinking, planning, strategizing, noodling, and then you get the answer. And that's an example of the reasoning. And if you look at how those agents and the agent functionality in ChatGPT works, it's the exact same thing. It's just doing a lot of reasoning, a lot of thinking. It's performing a task and then thinking about what to do next and then performing the next task. So ultimately, that research is potentially rooted in more of an academic world than the real world. The modern 4.0, the one that you can interact with today, is now known as a hybrid model. It does have an instant reply capability, but it also has a reasoning model capability. So a lot of the Anthropic models are also hybrid models. So realistically, you'd have to go back in time to use 4.0 back when it was a non-reasoning model to see the vast difference. But it was that delta, and that's why they turned 4.0 into a reasoning model. And it's not rocket science. They just gave it instructions. Instead of answering first, I want you to think through the answer and then make a call to itself and then go back and go forward. So just thanks for the great presentation. Are there any good online AI courses where one could brush up on the terminology / get better at a good foundational basics? I feel quite daunted by it all and I want to get up and skilled. Now, I hear this a lot, and you are not alone. There is it's a fire hose amount of information coming at us on a daily basis around AI, and there's so much terminology that it's just a bit scary. So don't feel like it's too overwhelming. This is very much something that we all have to just take step by step and learn as we go. Now, I advocate for using the AI tooling to learn about AI tooling. That's what I do. If I don't know about a topic, I'll ask the AI to teach me about it. I asked it to teach me philosophy the other day and talk about Marcus Aurelius and Aristotle, and I was blown away, and it changed my view on a few things. So you can use these AI tools, but don't rely on the answer. Use them as a bit of a thread puller. It goes and pulls a bit of information, allows you to then go and do your own research and learn the terminology. If you want to, and you want to get up to speed with some of the terminology in the product management space and or in the AI space, just ask the AIs to produce a cheat sheet for you and help you explain how these tools work. But I think at the end of the day, a structured educational program where you have a bunch of peers, because ultimately at the end of the day, learning by yourself and even learning with AI is good. But when you're in a cohort of people that are all kind of working towards the same objective, it's that force, it's that ultimate drive that everyone's pulling together with different perspectives and different life experience, and they're all looking at the problem in a slightly different way, that you get a much richer and richer experience. Now, AI is going to create a little echo chamber of the things you already know and the things you're kind of thinking already. And so joining programs kind of like Fourth Rev's Career Accelerator or programs similar to that are probably a little bit better at actually getting to a really good learning outcome. And so I'm not trying to shill for a Fourth Rev, but I have seen, and I do this professionally, I do workshops and training for folks, and you can definitely see people that are trying it by themselves and people that do it with a cohort, and the outcomes are vastly, vastly different. So we'll move on to the next question. As someone making a transition to PM at the moment, what are the paths and tools do you recommend I should be prioritizing and learning? Well, think about AI as a toolbox. So there's the ChatGPTs, that's a great toolbox to be able to pull a tool out of and work with. Then you've got all of your industry-specific tools. At the end of the day, there's no one tool or one path that you need to follow. Being a product manager is really about understanding the product management mindset, understanding how to look at the world through a value proposition. How do you actually dig through the noise and find the signal of what a customer genuinely wants, and then how do you deliver against that customer problem? And so product management is more of a mindset than it is a bunch of different ticks and tools and tricks. And so the one thing I would recommend prioritizing is to my last question, like get yourself in an environment with a cohort of people that are all learning roughly the same stuff, that are all driving in the same direction, because that momentum, as we talked about earlier, with the rock rolling down the hill, the momentum of you being in a cohort like that will create a much better outcome. But again, I will reinforce, use the AI tooling to learn about either the AI tooling or product management. I can assure you that the AIs are very, very good educators. They're very good teachers. You just need to ask the right questions. So my first question that you want to ask is, how do I write a really good prompt to learn about a topic? And when you start looking at a world like that and you get that answer back, you can start iterating on that, and then you can apply that technique to a bunch of other areas. I will give you one for one little technique that I love, which is when I'm a little bit confused about a topic, or I'm trying to get an AI to really help me understand a nuanced problem set, I will ask it to ask me a bunch of multiple choice questions, one at a time, so that the AI gets a really clear understanding of exactly what it is that I want to learn about, or exactly what it is I want it to do, without me having to write an essay of 1,000,000 lines to give all that nuanced information. I let the AI make inference, make the AI make assumptions, but then I guide those assumptions and I guide that inference towards the outcome that I want. So the next time you're stuck on a problem or you're trying to get a really great outcome, say to the AI, ask me a bunch of multiple choice questions, one at a time, and wait for my answer until you have all the context you need. So we'll move on to the next question, which is, what areas do you think AI devs are bad at right now? And I've seen problems with areas like data security and vibe-coded cloud apps, for example. Well, I think that this is a good question. I think that any junior developer that was building apps, side projects, they had a huge number of data security holes in their projects. But I don't necessarily think it's the fault of AI agents that are the problem here. Vibe-coded apps, I vibe code apps for a living, and I build them very, very quickly, and they don't have security bugs. And it's not because the AI agents, I'm doing anything special. It's because the AI agents are very capable of building things without security bugs. It's about knowing how and what to look for, and about knowing how to ask and frame your questions when you're using these tools. So I think one of the biggest drawbacks of them right now is that they know too much. We're actually seeing AI, I work in a niche tech stack, and so I'm constantly having to remind the AI that this is the tech stack we're working on, and it's not some like big normal JavaScript layout library over here. So the fact that they know everything about technology is actually one of the big drawbacks, because if you're trying to stay focused with really clean, really fast, really agile development practices, it actually becomes a detractor when the AIs just know far, far too much. So I'm pretty bullish there. I'm pretty positive on where AI agents are going. I'm absolutely convinced that they're going to replace engineers in the not too distant future, or at least augment the engineers to the point where one engineer can be managing or building several hundred products in any given year. So I think that we're definitely going to see software be commoditized. But in terms of where they are bad right now, it's not the AI, it's the user. If you don't know how these systems work, if you don't understand how large language models actually work, and you're trying to get them to do tasks, and you're not using the task and the tool in the right way, it's the equivalent of having only a hammer and only screws. You'll get that screw into something, but it won't be clean. It will be messy because it's the wrong tool for the job. You need a drill. And so, as you might have picked up already with my wheelbarrows and rocks and hammers, I'm a bit of a DIY handyman in my day job, in my personal life. Moving on to the next question. AI all depends on the data it's trained on, and so is AI bias or inaccuracy that something could cloud our judgment. We also won't be able to fully understand how it's arrived and occurred at that conclusion or solution, which might make us more comfortable at taking their responses. Which might make us more comfortable at taking their responses as in more cases. I can't really read. The screen is very small from here, so I probably messed that completely up. But what I think I'm hearing from you is that the question is around the fact that AI is trained on a huge amount of data, which has a lot of biases, and therefore, a lot of those times we don't really understand how it's come to that outcome, and it's in many cases really hard to detect or identify some bias. And that's a double-edged sword. That's a question for a much longer answer. But the short answer to that question is that human beings actually have the biggest bias that affects the performance in AI tooling and systems. And it's called the curse of knowledge bias. When we learn something, our brains are hardwired to get to the most efficient outcome of how we do that task. And we forget all the steps that we required to learn to get to that outcome. And unfortunately, with where AI is today, you need to step it through all the individual steps to get to an outcome. And most of us aren't even present to the things that we needed to get to that outcome ourselves. And you'll see this if you ever work with someone that's very senior and you ask them a question, they'll give you an answer, and the question and the answer didn't make any sense to you. And it's not because that person's trying to be nasty, it's they've genuinely forgotten that you don't know all these other things. They just assume that you already have that knowledge. This is the curse of biased knowledge. It happens all the time, and it's actually the biggest rate limiting factor. And so I'm not super worried about the biases in AI models. I don't necessarily think they're too hardwired and ingrained. You can definitely get them to be biased, for sure, but you can normally get a pretty balanced answer if you're using that tool correctly. So moving on, in terms of vibe coding is thrown around a fair bit at the minute. Do you have any suggestions as where we can learn vibe coding effectively? Is V0 a version of this? Or does vibe coding tend to be more front-end aesthetic builds? Absolutely, that makes sense. I think it's Byron. Yes, absolutely, that makes sense. The best way to learn vibe coding is to do it. But before you actually get into a vibe coding tool like Lovable or v0.dev or any of the other ones that are out there, there's a bunch that I, for some reason, have forgotten this evening. Where you want to start is in a Claude or a ChatGPT or a Gemini and talk about the thing that you're trying to solve. What's the problem you're trying to do? And what's the problem you're trying to solve? And what is the thing you're trying to build? And the one thing I would recommend is do not go into a vibe coding tool with a massive idea. Go in with a very specific feature or functionality or thing that you want to build and iterate and iterate and iterate. The biggest pitfall people make when it comes to vibe coding is they say, hey, I want to build a customer relationship management thing that does this and integrates with that and it does this and it has dashboards over here and that. And they throw that whole thing into a vibe coding interface and the outcome is just terrible. But if they went in there and said, I would like to create a customer relationship manager, can you help me create just a simple interface that allows me to upload and create a new contact? Start there. Now that you've got a contact, well, what do we need to do? We need to log events against that contact. Now you go to that. And now we've got a bunch of contacts with a bunch of events. We need a dashboard. Let's talk about the dashboard. So as product manager, and this is about that product management thinking and that product management view set, you want to make sure that you're looking at the value you're trying to create and stepping through each of the individual components or each of the individual elements of that value chain until you have successfully knocked them over. If you take that approach with vibe coding, I can promise you right out of the box, you will get a great outcome. And ultimately, just like any other tool, there's no better training, no better way to learn than just try. And for 20 bucks a month, it's absolutely cheap as chips to do. So do you believe there will be a day we'll be able to get an AI LLM to a place where limitations are acknowledged? Is the communication, I'm just going to keep walking, i.e. they communicate to the user, they don't know the answer rather than hallucinate. The worry is that people ignore the disclaimer and can make mistakes. I actually think we're at that day already. Genuinely, I think that this notion that AI hallucinates all the time is incredibly overblown. I work with these systems on a daily basis, and 9 times out of 10, when an AI comes up with a bad answer that you could theoretically consider as a hallucination, it's typically because I was not clear in my instruction to it, or I had an ambiguous outcome that did not have a clear objective that the AI needed to follow. I've built a bunch of data tools and massive applications that search through thousands and hundreds of thousands of documents line by line, and we're not getting any hallucination. I worked with some polling data recently for an Australian election. We had tens of thousands of rows in spreadsheets across hundreds and thousands of spreadsheets, and every single result was bang on accurate. So I think this notion of hallucination may have been a problem a few years ago, but once you learn how to use these tools, this idea that they hallucinate all the time is just not holding any weight. It's more a case of the user doesn't necessarily know how to use the tool. And I say this again, if you look at someone that's incredibly gifted, if you're a digital artist and you have one of those pads and you are whipping this incredible bit of digital art together, and then you hand that pen to me and I've got the same tool, I promise you I'm not going to get the same outcome. And that is the same with AI right now. If you are not proficient and skilled in how to use these tools, you're not going to get a great outcome. And it's not the tool's fault, it's on you. So it's very much a learning journey we have to go through. So we're kind of running over time now, so I'm just going to cherry pick one or two more questions and just see if there's anything else that we can kind of cover off. I'm just going to talk to these two anonymous attendees at the bottom there. Sorry, Andrea, Snog, Marry, Avoid, AI Edition, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini. Oh, okay, this is a good one. Definitely gonna snog Gemini. I'm gonna marry Claude, and I'm gonna avoid ChatGPT. Thank you for that really hard decision, because they're all, I kind of want a polyamorous relationship with all of them, if I'm being honest. I do use them all on a daily basis. So as a product manager, excited about being a product manager. That's awesome to hear, Charles. But as someone who's new to the industry, where do I begin? Well, you've done the right thing. You're coming to the masterclasses like this. Accelerator programs are really, really powerful. But we've kind of covered off a bunch of start by learning how to use the tooling to learn. And then you'll get a really great outcome. And so one or two more, we'll cover off the last two. Could you please expand more on your perspective regarding the impact of the switch to personalized products in the current product business model? Would this be through strategic segmentation or feature-based offers? Well, that's a great question, Anonymous. I think that what we're seeing is that personalization in products has been rate limited by the number of different variations that you can create an execution from a dev side. With AI that can now deeply personalize things in real time, we're going to start to see real deep personalization of almost every tool and every platform we use. A personal example, I was building a voice profile for my father, a communication profile. How does he form a sentence? And it took me 6 weeks. I spoke to a bunch of linguists and PhDs and professors, and identified 21 communication attributes that make up the way that we form a sentence. How do we actually construct the things that we want to say and how we say that? And that now is a 21-line JSON object, which I can hand to a large language model with a prompt, and it fundamentally changes the output of that large language model, which is really valuable if the large language model is acting as the voice of that person. But if you take that one capability and apply it to a web page, so as soon as a user authenticates and we know who that person is, all of the text and all of the copy and the layout of that page is dynamically adapted to that person's profile. Well, that's very achievable. So I think what we're going to start to see is that people are going to get really, really bespoke and tailored experiences. And the cost of producing technical outcomes is trending towards zero. And therefore, why wouldn't you? Why would you not offer your customers deeply personalized experiences? It's just better. It's more value. And ultimately, at the end of the day, that's what we are all about. So I hope that one answers that question. That's probably one of those questions you could do an entire workshop just on alone. So maybe in the future we can do that. But the last question of the night, I've tested Copilot Enterprise on our reimbursement tool, and it really gives misleading advice. I don't think average layperson will be able to prompt to get the right answer. So I put myself in their shoes as a good PM. Well, that is a great place to be, but I'm gonna highlight two key things. There was a recent research study coming out of MIT, which is being thrown around everywhere. And if you actually read the research study, it's not nearly as dire, but it's saying that 95% of enterprise AI programs are failing, or pilots are failing. And a vast majority of them are Microsoft Copilot Enterprise. That tool is, if there was marry, snog, avoid, that tool is very much on the avoid end of the spectrum, the extreme end of the avoid end of the spectrum. I think that one of the biggest challenges that enterprise companies have when they're delivering AI to their users is that these AI tools are so generic, they're functionally useless. And so Copilot is not what I would consider as an AI tool. It's actually counterproductive. It does not allow you to upskill. It does not allow you to customize. It does not allow you to genuinely get a deeply personalized experience. And it's very difficult for you to actually create a good outcome. Moreover, it's using models that are quite old in many cases. So I think Copilot is probably a bad example. But the rest of what you're saying about, as a product manager, most lay people are not really understanding how these tools are working and really trying to empathize with the average consumer and how these tools are being leveraged. That is absolutely what we have to be doing as product managers. So that is a great way to end tonight. Thank you very much for the question. I want to make sure that everyone knows that at the end of the day, we are living in a fantastic time. AI is going to be an incredible enabler. And you will have 525,600 minutes to decide how to spend. And AI is going to create some incredible outcomes for each and every one of you. So go forward and learn. Find a cohort to group up with and start building momentum on your own personal journey. And make sure at the end of the day, you are able to effectively leverage these tools and create incredible outcomes, not just for yourself, but for others. So thank you very much for your attention. I want to very much appreciate you all coming along. I look forward to seeing you all at our next masterclass, where we deep dive into the tech and actually get a little bit nerdy and really hands-on. This was surface layer tonight, very, very high level. This next one, we're going to get real nerdy, real deep, and actually see how to get these tools into our products and into our life cycles. So thank you very much for your attention, and thank you very much for coming along today. If you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to Justin and the team at Fourth Rev, and make sure that you keep in touch, and hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.